Welcome to another edition of Code M Radio. I'm Daryl Scott. For the next 60 minutes, Code M Radio will address topics that affect the lives of people around the world. Code M Radio is just one part of Code M Group LLC, which also publishes Code M Magazine. The mission of Code M Magazine is to create a trusting community among men that will inspire, educate, and act as a credible resource throughout the journey to manhood. You can sign up for your free subscription at codemmagazine.com or by texting 21777 to Code M. Follow us on social media, Facebook at Code M Magazine, Twitter and Instagram, that's CODEMAGINTL. Today, I am joined by the Reverend Dr. Leah Lewis. Reverend
Hey,
Doctor,
Daryl
how are you?
Scott. I'm well, Daryl Scott. How are you?
I am doing the best I can with what little I got.
I hear you, brother, but you know, you have riches untold, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. So, tell me, who's our guest going to be today?
Daryl, our guest today is the Reverend Paul Hobson Sadler, Sr. He's often been described as a Renaissance man. He was born in the city of Philadelphia. He attended Howard University, earning both a Bachelor of Art degree in political science and a Master of Divinity degree. He is a pastor, author, actor, and singer. He has published 2 books, recorded 2 vocal CDs, and appeared in movies, on television, and on the theatrical and concert stages. He is currently the senior pastor of Mount Zion Congregational Church, the United Church of Christ, and is the co-chair of the Christian Business League. Reverend Sadler is a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated and the United Supreme Council, Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rites of Free Masonry, Northern Jurisdiction, USA, Inc. Reverend Sadler enjoys numerous hobbies, including physical fitness, collecting, restoring classic cars, painting, and collecting African American and African art. He has been married for 38 years to the love of his life, Kim Martin Sadler. He is the father of 2 accomplished children, Robin Bijou Star Sadler and Paul H. Sadler Jr., and is the devoted grandfather of Paul Hobson Sadler III and Eric Jashawn Smith Jr. Most importantly, Reverend Sadler is a blood-bought and spirit-taught believer in Jesus Christ and a preacher and teacher of his gospel truth. So as you can see, Daryl, we're going to have an outstanding conversation today.
My very first question is, how does he manage his time? Because I need to learn that from him.
Well, you know what? We'll find out. We're going to
Okay.
ask him questions like that to determine how he handles this load, because I have to tell you, he also has a beautiful family. He is married to the love of his life. I believe they met at Howard University. He is a father, and he is even a grandfather. And so as we explore the month of August, which is National Wellness Month, we'll talk to Reverend Sadler about what he does to maintain his health, his sanity, his balance, and his creativity, particularly in days like these when we're all living in the midst of a pandemic.
Reverend Sadler, could you touch on that real quick? Just how you're handling this current situation?
You know, this is a very unique time for everyone. We're living in unprecedented times. I would liken these times only to perhaps war times when people's lives across the country and for this time, it's around the globe, have been impacted. And so, one of the things that I believe is that in every situation in life, you have to make the adjustments that are necessary to survive and thrive. So I am a person who thrives on change. A lot of people see change as an unwelcome visitor. I see change as a friend. I welcome change. And so when these circumstances came up, though adverse, the reality of being in a global pandemic, the reality of having to face and deal with some of the horrendous things that have happened to our people in this country have really been a source of inspiration to me to become more engaged in justice work, to become more engaged in striving to help our people to survive the pandemic and to be able to come out on the other side of this justice rebellion that we're dealing with, that we're engaged in, because all of us as African Americans are engaged in this rebellion. It's about our freedom. And so I just believe that we're all going to be better if we all do our part. And so that's what I'm trying to do in the midst of all of this. I'm trying to do everything I can do to help us all to come out better on the other side.
Well, Reverend Sadler, you have a long history as one who fights for justice. You are a part of the United Church of Christ, which is deemed a progressive denomination in the Christian church. And you also, as I understand it, got your formative years in ministry under the tutelage of the Reverend Jeremiah Rite, who was also one of my professors. Can you talk about your background and how that has informed the way in which you go about fighting for justice for our people?
Well, one of the interesting realities about the United Church of Christ, our denomination, is that most pastors in the United Church of Christ have been arrested at some protest or another at some point in their journey. So I've seen the inside of a jail protesting and boycotting for justice. But, I have spent countless hours standing on the street, marching, protesting, and fighting for what was right, what was rightfully ours in this country and what we had been denied for so long. And so, I'm grateful to be able to say that I've seen things happen, seen things change as a result of the justice work. But it really, really was inspired by my upbringing. I grew up in Philadelphia. I grew up in Philadelphia around the time of Frank Rizzo. Some of you may know that name. The president invoked the name of Frank Rizzo recently when questioned about his comment, shoot, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Which he attributed to Frank Rizzo. It wasn't Frank Rizzo's quote at all. But what he was confusing that with was Frank Rizzo's quote, shoot first and ask questions later, which Frank Rizzo said in regard to the police dealing with African Americans in the city of Philadelphia. And so I grew up in the midst of that kind of a policing situation when he was the chief of police in Philadelphia, superintendent of the police department. And so I always realized that what he was doing was wrong and that something had to be done about it. So I at the age of 13, joined the Black Power movement in Philadelphia and was a part of a group called the Black Liberation Force. And I can remember as a 13-year-old being in meetings at the Black Liberation Force at our headquarters and having the police outside in plain clothes sitting in cars with cameras, videotaping, waiting for us to make one wrong move so they could come and raid our headquarters. So it kind of started out that way. My dad was always very honest with us when we were growing up about what it meant to be a Black man in America. We talk about the talk that parents had. My dad talked to us all the time about what it was like growing up as a Black man in America. And told us about his experiences. So I never had any glassy-eyed idea of what America was. I always understood America was a place where justice was in large measure for just us, and we weren't the us. And so I never saw anything other than a need for change in this country. And so, as I said, I started out at the age of 13, and it hasn't stopped. And I've been on the forefront, fighting for justice and equality, and still doing it because I just see it as so important to our people. And I don't believe until we experience complete equality in this country, what we deserve as citizens of this nation, for paying the taxes that we pay, for helping to build this country. Until we receive it, we got to keep fighting for it. We got to keep demanding it. As Frederick Douglass said, power can seize nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. And so we have to keep demanding. And so that's always been a part of who I am.
As a 13-year-old joining this organization and being a part of this movement, did you have any fear of possible repercussions? I mean, you're 13.
You know, I have to say that I'm grateful to have been raised around a bunch of young guys, all of whom had the same kind of a vision. When you have grown up in the Black community at the time we did, right, on the heels of the civil rights movement, and becoming a teenager at the beginning of the Black Power movement, and at that age being brutalized by the police in Philadelphia. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was thrown against the wall, had a nightstick pushed and jammed in my back, how many times the police went through my pockets on the streets just because I was standing on the corner, hanging out with my friends. All of them good kids. Nobody ever got in trouble. Not one of the kids I grew up with ever went to jail. So I'm not talking about people who were a threat to the community or a threat to the society. I'm talking about productive citizens. All our parents worked. All of our parents got up and went to work every day, and they were trying to raise us right. But we still experienced the brunt of police brutality in the city of Philadelphia. So I was not afraid to be a part of the Black Liberation Force. I was afraid to walk on the streets of Philadelphia for fear of the police in the city of Philadelphia. So I figured I would be better off as a part of an organization that was fighting for justice than to be out on the streets with no support whatsoever. So fear was never even an issue.
So, Reverend Sadler, I'm amazed by your remarks, particularly because, here you are, a man who is college educated, you have a master's degree, you are pastoring a well-known church in the city of Cleveland, one that people might describe as middle class, right? You clearly have not forgotten where you came from. You have not forgotten the challenges faced by African Americans past or present. How then have you maintained this demeanor that says, I am going to press on and run and see what the end going to be? You're going to fight for justice. And I know for a fact that you have instilled this mindset even in your children. How have you maintained this perspective and not lost touch with the community?
Well, here's the reality. Racism and injustice in America is alive and well. It didn't just pop up with the senseless and brutal murder of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Ahmaud Arbery. It didn't just pop up. It's been there always. It's been a part of the fabric of this country for 400 years, as long as we've been here. We came here by way of brutality. We came here by way of violence. And so to think that somehow that education or somehow that maybe some resources or some position could insulate you or isolate you from that brutality and from that violence is ludicrous, because the reality is I was pastoring the most prominent church in New Orleans, and I was driving home from dropping off my babysitter, and the police pulled me over, pulled me out of my car, made me put my hands on the trunk, went through my pockets, threw everything I had on the back of the trunk, and said, when I asked for badge numbers, they refused to give me badge numbers. Give me your card. I said, well, we don't have a card. And so, now the one thing in that situation that my position and my influence gave me was access to the mayor of the city of New Orleans, who I called that night. and told him what had happened to me. And the next day, those police officers were sitting in the police chief's office, and the police chief called me, said, "What do you want me to do with them?" So there was because I was in a black city with a black mayor and a black city council and a black police chief. So I was able to get some justice in that situation, but the justice doesn't take away the pain or the debasing emotional experience that you have had. It doesn't make it disappear. You know, it's just like if somebody takes your loved one, somebody murders your loved one, and you go to court, and that person goes to jail for the rest of their lives. They go to jail, and maybe you feel a little better. But the pain of what you lost is still there. When your dignity is taken away from you in a situation like that with the police, that doesn't disappear. And nothing that can happen can make it disappear. That's not the only time that happened to me. That happened to me in 3 cities. In 3 cities, and of all the cities that I've lived in. So the reality for me is it's present. It's a daily reality with which we all live. And I have a son. I have a son, and I have to be concerned about my son every day going out in these streets, and 2 grandsons. And I have to be concerned about them when they grow up going out in these streets. So I can't sit down and say, well, you know, I got what I need. I'm good. I'm gonna go retire to the island somewhere and not be bothered with this. No, because I got to care for these kids, my own kids and everybody else's kids. I cannot give up the battle. I cannot give up the fight, because the fight is a daily and ever-present reality. It's constant. And as long as I have breath, I'm going to fight it.
Our conversation with the Reverend Paul Sadler continues after this. You're listening to Code M Radio. Don't forget to visit codemmagazine.com to get your free subscription. Reverend Sadler, you're born in Philly. How did we migrate to Cleveland?
Well, it was a journey around and about that got me here. I grew up in Philadelphia, went off to school in Washington, D.C. at Howard University. I stayed there and finished my undergraduate degree, went back to Philadelphia, taught public school there for a while, and then came back to Washington, D.C. to go to seminary. I finished the seminary there and then went on to Chicago, where I spent 3.5 years with my mentor, Dr. Jeremiah A. Rite, who, by the way, just received the Lifetime Achievement Award from our great fraternity, Omega Psi Phi, just today. And so left Chicago and went to New Orleans to serve a church in New Orleans. And while I was in New Orleans, I got a call from the United Church of Christ from a good friend of mine, Dr. Henry Simmons. And Henry asked me if I would consider being his successor at the United Church of Christ in the national office, which was moving from New York to Cleveland. It was in the process of moving from New York to Cleveland. And so, believe this or not, I had said I would never work a job in the national setting. It wasn't anything that interested me unless I could do Henry Simmons' job. And that was the one job that was offered to me. And so I could not turn the opportunity down. I was hoping my wife would say she didn't want to move, but I asked her and she said, oh, sure, we can go. And so we ended up, I spent 2 months in New York because I had to go up there and close down my office in New York and then move here to Cleveland. And I've been here for going on 29 years. Never thought I'd be here 29 years. We moved around when our kids were young. Every 3 years we were moving somewhere else. And when we moved here after 3 years, the kids said to me, Dad, isn't it time for us to move? I said, there's no reason to move. Everything's going well. Don't you like it here? They said, yeah, but we move every 3 years. I said, well, we're not going to move this time. We're going to stay here. That was 29 years ago. So we're still here. I like to talk about Cleveland because one of the amazing things that I found as soon as I arrived in Cleveland was something that I wanted to share with everybody in Cleveland when I got here. And that was what I say and have always said. Cleveland, even when I got here 29 years ago, was a gold mine waiting to be dug. And I made a determination that I was going to dig it. I made a determination that I was going to stay here and do everything in Cleveland that I wanted to do, build, grow, expand, and have all the experiences and opportunities that I wanted here in Cleveland and try to make a difference in Cleveland. I hope I have made some kind of a difference here in Cleveland, but I know Cleveland's been an extraordinary blessing to me.
Reverend Sadler, it's wonderful to hear you say these things about Cleveland, and I'm going to invoke some stats that aren't very pretty, but will lead us into a conversation about wellness. So a recent poll came out, and it said that Cleveland was the most challenging city to live in during the pandemic. There have also been polls that said Cleveland is one of the 3 worst cities for African American women. And I'm invoking these stats because I want to talk to you about wellness. And I also want to invoke the Reverend Dr. Jeremiah A. Rite, who we know has suffered from a stroke. He is doing better now. I saw him in a webinar just a matter of weeks ago, and I was thrilled to see him doing better. How do you, in light of all that you do, make sure that you have a healthy balance in your life?
For me, everything begins with self-care. I believe that discipline is the foundation of a successful, healthy, effective life. And so because of that, I have certain disciplines that I maintain in my life. I get up every morning and I do yoga. I get up every morning and I have a quiet time when I pray and spend time with the Lord. 3 days out of the week, I have a prayer call where I'm praying for members of our church and their concerns. I exercise regularly. I got a gym in my basement. I make jokes, and anybody who follows me on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter knows that I posted a few weeks ago that wifey said, if I go to the gym, I'm going to have to sleep on the 3rd floor. And so I made a determination that I was going to have to make it happen in the basement, in my home gym, because I ain't going up on the 3rd floor. So in reality, I work out at home regularly. I walk. The other day, I was at Target. I didn't mean to give them a commercial, but it is what it is. The other day, I was at Target, and I saw hula hoops. My wife had said, hula hooping is good exercise. So I said, well, I'm going to get us a couple of hula hoops. Now, here we are, senior citizens, if you will. And we both have hula hoops now. And so everybody I know who I think might know how to hula hoop. I'm saying, help me with this. Now I'm going to get this. We're working on it. We're going to have our hula hooping down soon. But, I jump rope. I always admired Muhammad Ali and how he could jump rope. And so I bought a professional quality jump rope so I can jump rope. So you got to take care of yourself. Right now, wife and I are eating a vegan diet. And so all of that helps to impact my wellness. Mm-hmm. And I realize the importance of taking care of your mental health. I realize the importance of that. So I have lots of good friends who I spend time talking to. Most of my good friends are out of town. So we spend a lot of time on the phone. And I've got hobbies. Hobbies are very important. I have several hobbies, that keep my attention. And so those are the kinds of things that I do for self-care, and I make time for all of it in the midst of everything else that I have.
So did you get a weighted hula hoop?
No, I did not, because the little plastic one I have is hitting the floor too much. So a weighted one might be really difficult.
Yeah, you got to take your time with that. I know you'll build up to it. That's wonderful.
Now, did you get a weighted jump rope? Because
I
that's
did.
the new thing.
I got a weighted jump rope. I sure did. We wouldn't handle jump rope with leather strap. Uh, and I'm having a ball with that. I love it. Yeah, but the weighted jump rope is the latest thing they're pushing now.
How did you the discipline thing of being able to do everything, because between movies and singing and books and travel and being an educator,
Mm-hmm.
you have a very full plate. I can't even tell what color the plate is. There's so much on it. Where does this discipline come from? How do you get it, and how do you keep it going?
You know, I remember when I was in college and someone asked me, "What do you want to do?" And I ran this list of about 10 things that I wanted to do in my life. And they laughed and said, "You're confused." And I said, "Confused? No, I'm not hardly confused. I'm going to do all 10 of these things." And the person I was talking to would just went away just befuddled, because they couldn't imagine why anybody wouldn't just want to be a doctor or just want to be a lawyer or just want to be a teacher. Why can't you make up your mind, they would say to me, what you want to do. I ran into the same thing when I went to seminary. When I went to seminary, the first sermon I preached in chapel, I sang before I preached. One of my seminary professors came up to me and said, "Sadler, preach or sing, but don't do both." So for a little while, I tried to pay attention to him, but I realized that God had given me a gift that I needed to use. And I wasn't going to stuff my gift or hide my gift or put a bushel over my gift to please anybody else. Just if I'm the only one who's ever done this, then I'm going to be the only one who does it. So I've always just believed whatever God gives you, use it. So, and if you're using your gifts, you're always going to have time. I've always been a person who had 100 projects on my plate all the time. From the time I was in college, I've always had a lot of projects on my plate, and I found that excited me. That really helped to just cause my passion to bubble when I was doing a number of things and had a number of balls in the air at one time. So that's just my life. That's who I am, and it works for me. It won't work for everybody, but it works for me.
You know, Pastor, you made me think of Luke 12:48. To whom much is given, much is required. So talk to us about your formative years. Did your parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, your community cultivate your giftedness? And then when did you come to understand that your gifts were God ordained?
You know what? Absolutely. In terms of the cultivation of the gifts, things that I showed an interest in, most of the time, someone would invest in. And when I say invest, I don't mean money. I mean, someone would say, "Oh, you like music? Well, I'm going to take you to see this concert." Someone would say, "Oh, you like Black history?" Because the Black history was a passion of mine from the time I was a little boy. I was eager to learn more about the history of our people. I mean, when I say a little boy, I'm talking about 12. I wanted to know about Black people. What have Black people done? What have my people accomplished in this world? And when some of my parents' friends found that out, every time they would come to the house, they'd bring me a book. They'd bring me a Black history game. They said whatever they thought would encourage me, they would bring it. And so, yes, the community encouraged me. But the one area the community really, really encouraged me was in speaking, in public speaking. There was never a time from elementary school that I was not pushed forward to speak. That was the gift that people saw in me, was the gift of speaking, and they pushed me forward. So when I wanted to have a role in the play, I would never get it because I was going to be the narrator. The teacher would say, "No, Paul, you're the narrator." Let the other children be the monkey and the clown and all that in the play. You got to be the narrator, because they knew I was the one who could stand up there and read it and speak articulately. And so that became my role. And that was everywhere. That was all the way through until I got to college. And when I was a student at Howard University, I had to take principles of speech in my sophomore year. And Mrs. Gray, I will never forget her, was my teacher. And the first time I gave a speech, after class was over, she said, Paul, walk with me across the campus. So I walked with her across the campus. And as we're walking across the campus, she looked at me and she said, you know, you have a gift. And I didn't know what, I wasn't sure, but she knew. She said, and you have to use it. Those words that she spoke to me, in addition to the straight A average that I had in that class, encouraged me that maybe Mrs. Gray was right, that maybe speaking was what I was supposed to be doing. I knew I had experienced my call at the age of 12 and all that, but I was running like if somebody was chasing me away from that call. I didn't want to be a boy preacher. That was the last thing I wanted to do. Some young guys, all they want to do is get up and be a boy preacher and stand up and put on a suit and act like an old man. I was not interested in that. I didn't want to preach. I didn't want to do anything. That was going to come way down the line. All I wanted to do was live my life as a young man. And so, the fact that my ability to speak before people was always encouraged. It was always recognized. And my grandmother said, when I was a little boy, when I was just around the same time that I had experienced my call, around the age of 12, she said, you're either going to be a preacher or a lawyer. And then maybe 6-8 months after she said that, she started calling me Reverend. My grandmother just started calling me Reverend. And I was 13 when she started doing that. So that, the encouragement was always there from in my formative years to cultivate the gifts that were there.
All right, there's more from the Reverend Paul Sadler when Code M Radio returns. Welcome back to Code M Radio. Our guest today is the Reverend Paul Sadler. Now, in looking at your bio and everything that you've done, you've had the opportunity to participate in a couple of movies that were based in Cleveland. And if memory serves me correctly, I think you're in the last scene of the Denzel Washington production, in that dinner scene where he walks into the room. Are you in that?
No, I'm actually not in that scene. I'm in the church scene.
Oh, okay. So any more movies planned, or how did you get those roles?
So it's interesting how things come to you. I always wanted to act. Acting was something that was a passion. It was something I wanted to do, but I gave ministry first precedence in my life. And so a lot of the things that I wanted to do, I kind of put on the back burner. But God always found a way to draw forth the gifts in whatever way. And so everywhere I was, I always did something. I was either directing plays. When I was in New Orleans, I directed plays at Dillard University. In Chicago, I had a dance teacher at Trinity who encouraged me to come to her class and take classes with her. So there was always somebody drawing forth the gifts. And Edna Duffy here in Cleveland was the first one in Cleveland to get me on the stage. I had a member at my church who was working for one of Cleveland's #1 casting directors, Lillian Piles. And she said to me, Reverend Sadler, would you like to be in the movie? It's one of my members. And I said, oh, sure. What do you want me to do? She said, you can come and be an extra. You can have the experience. It'll be great. So I went. That was the Welcome to Collinwood, the George Clooney movie. Mm-hmm. And so I went. I was there a couple of 3 days on set. And it was good. I had a good time. I enjoyed it. Well, I built a relationship with Lillian Paz, who's a great friend now. And Lillian would call me from time to time and say, Rev, I've got a part that I think will work for you. She called me for Antoine Fisher. Some of the I auditioned for a couple of different things. The one thing she wanted me to audition for was a blind piano player, and I probably would have gotten it, except Eddie Backus Sr. also auditioned, who happens to be a blind piano player. And so he got the part and did a great job. But I ended up in that movie as well. And Lillian then called me, the most recent film, With This Ring, that is a TV movie that was done for Lifetime with Jill Scott and Eve and, you know, lots of amazingly, Regina Hall, Brian White, some amazingly gifted people were in that movie. And I played the pastor at the end of the movie who actually ended up marrying the couple, the last couple to finally get married. And so, and that was just, again, Lillian calling me on the phone and saying, I've got a role for you. The director, Nzinga Stewart, wants a real pastor who happens to be an actor. And I was the only one in town who was a real pastor who happened to be an actor. So the role was literally just put on my plate. And when I went in, immediately when I stood in front of Nzinga and did the lines, did the audition, there was a chemistry right away with the director. And so, you know, I got the call back the next day, you got the part, you know, come on in and do it. You know, it's been lots of fun. Nothing is on the horizon right now that I know about, but you know, something could come up any day. It just depends on what's going on. In my retirement, my plan is to do a lot more acting. I always make jokes, you know, I'm going to be the old man selling funeral insurance on the commercials. You know, I said, do you have your funeral insurance yet? Do you know she died and she didn't have any insurance? Well, you can call and I'll give the name of the company. So that's the kind of stuff I'm going to do in my retirement.
I love it. So you had an opportunity to act with your fellow folks from Philly, Eve and Jilly from Philly. How very cool is that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was quite an amazing experience.
So Cleveland is really, they've been doing some things in the film industry of late. So this very well may be a great place for you post-retirement, as you mentioned.
Well, you know, there are lots of movies that are done here. The city was giving incentives, especially in the early 2000s. The city was giving a lot of incentives, and there were a lot of movies made here. A lot of folks don't know about some of the movies that were made. Many of the Marvel superhero movies were made here. The Spider-Man movies, the early Spider-Man movies were all made downtown in Cleveland because they found out that they could make downtown Cleveland look like New York very easily. And very inexpensively, but they couldn't do location shooting in downtown New York for the cost that it took them to transform downtown Cleveland. So it was easier just to make downtown Cleveland look like New York and cheaper.
Yeah, and you know, our state legislature has helped us a great deal with the film tax incentive.
Right.
So we just need that to get boosted. And there have been a number of films that have shot here, including, what was the one? There was a sister director and the gentleman who was in Black Panther. It was a pretty hot movie. Does anybody remember the name of it?
Queen and Slim?
That's it. Queen and Slim.
That's the couple that they get stopped. They wind up shooting the officer and they try to ride through the rest of the state or something.
They actually make their way to Louisiana.
Okay.
Yeah, they make their way to Louisiana, to New Orleans. And we won't give away the ending, but that film began here in Cleveland, and it was shot in the St. Clair area of the city. So Reverend Sadler, you talked about giving God precedence in your life, giving ministry precedence. And it seems that God has been very faithful to you in terms of creating other opportunities for you to use your gift, to use your voice in song and in acting. Can you talk about faith and how you cultivated that determination to please God first and foremost?
Life will, if you listen to the lessons that life teaches, life will help to cultivate your faith, because the experiences of life, and everybody has different kinds of experiences that challenge your faith. Faith that is not challenged is not faith. Faith that is not tested in the crucible of adversity is not faith. Faith is not for sunny days. Faith is for the storms of life, for the challenges of life, for the adversities of life. And so when your faith is tested, and you know, my faith has been tested enough for me to be able to write several books about that. But the reality is that over time, your faith increases. Your faith becomes stronger because of the experiences that you go through, the things that come into your life that create challenges. One of my dear friends, Dr. Susan Newman, says it like this: everything in your life is either a blessing or a lesson. And when you begin to look at your life as either a blessing or a lesson, then you don't disparage any experience. You don't try to avoid any experience, because you know that there is something good that's going to come out of every experience that you have. And so my faith has grown and become stronger in every experience, especially the challenges of life. The loss of loved ones, challenges to your work, and even the opportunities to grow that have been averted by the evil intentions of other people. Many times we'll have opportunities to grow, and those opportunities will be averted because folks get in the way. Sometimes people will do everything they can to try to stop your progress and to thwart your opportunities in life. And it is through those situations that your faith grows, and you begin to believe and recognize that you have to put your trust in God. And you have to trust God above all, foremost and first. You have to put God first in your life. And when you do that, and you lean on your faith, you lean on your faith in the difficult times and the challenging times, and God always comes through.
You've acted, you've done books, you sing, you dance. How does that all tie in to your faith?
You know, one of the things that I've always said about the works that we do in life, that everything that we do should give glory to God, number one. If God has given you a gift, the gift ought to, number one, glorify God. Number two, bless you. Number three, bless your family. So if God has given you a gift, the gift ought to be a blessing, to God. It ought to be a blessing to somebody else. Because if no one's blessed by what you do, what's the purpose? What's the real reason to do something if it's not going to bless somebody else? I just think that you do these things, and all of them, the thread that ties it all together is that it's all for the glory of God. It is all for the glory of God. Now, you know, I had an opportunity once to play a role in a movie where I had to smoke a joint on the screen. And I turned it down. It was the principal role in a movie. And I turned it down. I wasn't going to do it. I said, there's no way. So I'm a pastor. I'm a Christian. I'm not going to smoke a joint. You know, some pastors and Christians who are actors say, well, I'm an actor, so I can do anything because I'm acting. But I don't see it that way. I see everything I do as representing Christ. So I'm never going to do anything to bring dishonor to him. I'm never going to do anything to bring dishonor to those who I serve. You know, I've told my members many a time, I said, you'll never hear that your pastor was somewhere sitting on a bar getting drunk, because I'm never going to do that to you. I'm never going to embarrass you like that. So how do you think I feel about God? I'm never going to dishonor God with the things that I do. So everything ties together because it all is to give God glory.
Reverend Sadler, I mean, that moved me. You know, I know that you're not judging how other people conduct themselves. But how lovely it would be if we as a people decided that we had very highbrow standards and expectations for ourselves, because that could have a positive influence on our community. And for me, it kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation when we were talking about the resurgent Black Lives Matter movement and the expectations and drive that we must have as a people to determine that we get justice and equity and the full benefits of our citizenship, because we are citizens of the United States and we have long standing in this nation. What are your thoughts right now, though, for our community, and how do we heal as a result of the deaths of our beloved Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd? The list goes on. We could talk about Tamir Rice here in the city of Cleveland. What do we as a community have to do in order to ensure that we get justice?
So there's a couple things that are reality. What I really the way I really want to answer that question is, I think we've done everything we need to do. I think that the majority culture needs to step up to the plate and, number one, confess the sin that is the original sin of America, racism. It needs to be confessed. It needs to be repented of, and then it needs to be atoned for. And atonement is very important, because atonement means that you're going to do something to make it right. My sermon this morning was, how do you make it right? How do you make it right? So the point being, if something is wrong in our society, how do we make that right? It starts with confession. And we're not the ones that need to confess anything. So I'm not putting the full weight of our justice on us. I'm putting the weight, the largest percentage of the burden on white America, because they're the ones who have done wrong. And I thank God that a large percentage of folk who are not from our community have recognized that is a sin, that racism and white privilege that seethes at the heart of America's culture. My nephew, Dr. Rodney Sadler, often says it like this, that the American system of justice has not gone wrong. It's functioning exactly as it was designed to function. And so when you realize it's functioning as it was designed to function, that means it was designed to oppress us. It was designed to oppress Black people. So our role is to continue to punctuate the reality to the people who have perpetuated the injustice, to continue to say over and over and over again until we are heard beyond the shadow of doubt that Black lives matter. Black lives matter. And this is not to say that other lives don't matter, but one of my good friends made the best example that I have ever heard the other day. He sent this to me in a text. He said, Paul, for the people who say all lives matter, when we say Black lives matter, he said, that's just like saying when your house is on fire and you call the fire department says, we'll come, but we're not going to come right away because, everybody else's house on your block is important. All houses matter. But my house is on fire right now. So right now, my house matters. So Black lives matter because we're the ones at risk. Black lives matter because we're the ones who are being senselessly killed. That's why Black lives matter. Black lives matter because our lives are being taken intentionally and unjustly. And I need to say and repeat, intentionally and unjustly. It's not a situation that just happens in the heat of the moment. No, a person has in their heart and in their mind that when they get an opportunity that they're going to kill a Black person. That's how this is happening. That's the reality. And so when you look at it that way, then what we've got to do is bring about radical reform in the policing system in America. Radical reform. It's got to change completely how we do it.
When we come back, we'll wrap up with Reverend Paul Sadler when Code M Radio returns.
Welcome back to Code M Radio with our very special guest, the Reverend Paul Hobson Sadler Sr. Pastor Sadler, what advice do you have for our listeners today?
Well, if I were to try to distill one thing that I might offer to those who are listening today is that we are living in challenging times. We are living in an age when everything that has been brewing at the heart of this nation and in the world has come to a head. And those times are not only challenging, but they are powerful and pointed, and they are also an opportunity. This is the greatest opportunity that people of color in the world have ever had. I was active in fighting in the Free South Africa movement. We were fighting for one country to get freedom and equality. Right now, Black people in Brazil are grabbing a hold to the Black Lives Matter mantra and striving for their liberation from oppression. Black people in India are grabbing onto the Black Lives Matter mantra and striving for their liberation. And Black people in America are standing and boldly stepping forward and saying, it's time out for this inequitable society in which we've been living. And it's time out for a society when our lives are at risk and they don't mean anything. When our lives are being taken and they don't mean anything. What I'm going to encourage the audience to do is to find themselves at the center of this movement. Find themselves at the center of this movement and do everything that you can do to not only bring about a change in our nation, but a change in the world. Because we found out during the Free South Africa movement that we could change the world, because we protested and we went to jail and we lobbied in Congress for economic sanctions. And it was the economic sanctions that America brought against South Africa that brought down the apartheid regime. We changed the world. That can happen all around the globe if we have the same intentionality and put forward the same effort. I think that we can make a huge difference in the way people of color are viewed and treated in the world if we all step up and do our part.
Well, Reverend Sadler, we have to give thanks to the three women who began this movement with a simple hashtag Black Lives Matter. And you're indeed correct. It has become a global movement. And my prayer, and I join you in it, is that we do not stop until we get all that we are due. And we want to thank you at Code M Radio for your time today, for the wisdom you have shared with us, and for your authenticity. You are one of the most authentic men of God that I know personally. I have a great deal of respect for you and your beloved wife, Kim Martin Sadler, and we're going to have to get her on Code M Radio one day soon. And we wish you the very best and have no doubt that our listeners have gained some great insights today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on. I've enjoyed it so much.
Reverend Sadler, thank you very much. For the Reverend Dr. Leah Lewis, I'm Daryl Scott. Join us again next week for another edition of Code M Radio.